Students, welcome to another Mr. Ness screencast. Today we are looking at major global migration streams over the past 500 years. And here are your objectives. Please pause the video, look these questions over, and get ready to copy some vocab and take some notes. The most common cause for migration is job opportunities. Today, most migrants searching for jobs engage in what is called free labor. In theory, free labor means that workers are able to choose if they want to work and choose for whom they work. Ideally, they will work for themselves. I say theoretically because if a migrant is poor and desperate, he or she may not feel completely free to turn down work. But in theory, people who migrate for work today are free to accept or refuse a job. In the rest of this video, I'm going to tell you about 3 major migration streams in history that involved labor that was not free. All of them involve some degree of restriction on migrants' ability to choose if they wanted to work and for whom. The first example is called chattel slavery, and it's a type of slave labor where the slave is treated as property. Chattel slaves have no rights and have no free will. They can be bought and sold, tortured, or killed without punishment. Chattel slavery is associated with the transatlantic slave trade, which led to the forced migration of 12.5 million men and women from Africa to the Americas. This occurred starting in the 1500s and lasting until the 1800s. So to recap, chattel slavery is an entirely unfree form of labor, and between 1500s and 1800s it led to the forced migration of millions of men and women from mostly West Africa to North America, South America, and the Caribbean. The next type of labor is called indentured servitude. Please fill this in on your vocab sheet. Indentured servitude is a system of unfree labor in which a migrant agrees to work for a period of time in order to pay off the cost of migration. During their term of indenture, the indentured servant must work for their employer. They have few rights, and abuse and exploitation are common. However, unlike chattel slavery, indentured servants cannot be bought or sold, and after their term of indenture is up, they are free. One example of indentured servitude were indentured servants from England who migrated to the 13 colonies, the British colonies in North America, in the 1600s and 1700s. Although their numbers were small, about 150,000 people in all, they're an important part of colonial American history, and the similarities and differences in the legal treatment of indentured servants and slaves reveals a lot about the formation of race in North America. The other migration stream of indentured servants that I want you to know about is indentured servants from India and from China who migrated to many parts of the Caribbean, including Cuba, Trinidad, Venezuela, and Guyana. You will learn more about this migration stream in class. To recap, in the 17th and 18th century, many people from England moved to Britain's colonies in North America as indentured servants. And then in the 19th century, many more people from China and from India migrated to the Caribbean as indentured servants. The last type of labor is called guest workers. And guest worker programs are responsible for significant migration streams in the US, in Europe, and in the Gulf states of the Arabian Peninsula. Guest workers are workers who get temporary permission from immigration authorities to work in another country. Countries with guest worker programs usually face labor shortages and want to recruit foreigners for a limited time period without actually granting them permanent residence. Guest workers are allowed to move within the country and seek jobs on an open market, and in many countries they have been able to obtain citizenship over time. But as non-citizens whose status is dependent on their working, they are always subject to deportation. Now let's look at some major source and destination areas for guest workers throughout history. The first stream of guest workers that I want you to know about came from countries in North Africa and Turkey, and they migrated to countries in Europe. And this occurred in the 1950s following World War II and lasted until the 1970s. At this time, huge numbers of workers were needed in Europe to help rebuild after the devastation of World War II. In addition, birth rates in Europe were low, and elder dependency was high, so workers were needed. European countries invited guest workers from countries like Turkey, Morocco, and Algeria. Many of these workers did eventually get citizenship and stayed, and today European countries like France and Germany have sizable populations of people of North African or Turkish descent. The next guest worker stream is occurring right now, and it involves guest workers from South Asia, including India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh, moving to the Gulf states, which include countries like Qatar, Oman, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. The Gulf states are currently experiencing massive construction booms and need workers to work on construction projects. Qatar recently hosted the World Cup and relied on 2 million South Asian guest workers to build all the soccer stadiums. This is really amazing considering that the entire population of Qatar is only 3 million. So literally 2/3 of all the people there are guest workers, most of them from South Asia. There's one more guest worker stream that I have never seen appear on the AP Human Geography exam, but I think it's worth mentioning because it happened here in the US. And that stream was guest workers from Mexico who came to the US also after World War II. And this was called the Bracero program. Most of these guest workers did agricultural work in the US. And that's all for today. Review the objectives, and if you don't know the answer to any of them, rewind the video and look again. I will see you in class. Bye, students.